This is The Devil's Guide to D&D. Devil's Delegate here, and we're looking at the Wizard subclass Order of Scribes from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Before dealing with the effectiveness, I've got to say that flavor-wise, this subclass rubs me the wrong way. It seems to be about more than normally scholarly wizards and, well, scribes. And it partly is, with magic quills and scrolls. But its most important feature is a souped-up familiar mixed with an arcane eye that, theme-wise, is more fitting for some kind of shadow wizard or a close cousin to the Echo Knight. I'd rather if they'd cut this in half, perhaps giving more word-oriented powers to the scribe and create an Echo wizard for the rest. Turns out there's a good reason the whole thing feels off. Part of the Order of Scribes was originally from a subclass for the Artificer called the Archivist, whose deal was that it created a magical computer. A lot of the features seem to fit more naturally with that concept. Well, let's get past my feelings and get to the subclass's effectiveness. Answering, is it good? And I can answer that now. There's no way to say. How good it is dependent on your game. Far more dependent than other wizard subclasses and most subclasses in D&D. It has numerous features that will work well in some games and be very weak in others, while yet other features will never come up in a majority of games. Let's look at the specifics. At second level, you get Wizardly Quill, which gives you a pen and unending ink, as well as the ability to erase whatever you write. This is the kind of ribbon ability I like, as there's a lot of out-of-combat shenanigans you can get into. Blacking out important documents or maps so that only you can read them. Becoming a graffiti artist. Changing back signs. Getting people to sign contracts that you can change. Fun roleplay stuff. The Quill also allows you to massively reduce the amount of time you spend copying a spell in your spellbook. I've seen people saying this was an amazing ability. I've played D&D for 42 years, almost 43. I've played in countless other people's campaigns over that time. And this has never come up. In battle, spell recording just isn't a thing I've ever seen. If someone is copying a spell, it's in downtime, and 10 minutes or 10 hours, it really doesn't matter. And I've never been in a game that plays out spell copying. Now, if you're in a campaign where you keep running into wizards on the road who will let you look at their spell books, but just for 15 minutes, then this is good for you. For everyone else, this is nothing. More importantly, also, at second level, there's Awakened Spellbook, which lets you use your spellbook as a focus. Sure, it's a bit bulky, but sure. Lets you recopy your spellbook into a new spellbook, which is another of those things that has never come up in 42 years. And then gives you two actual features. The first, once a day you can cast a ritual spell without adding the 10 minutes. Which, considering the ritual spells, isn't really a big deal, as you can normally wait a few minutes to set an alarm or get your unseen servant to make tea, and Tiny Hut is still going to take a minute to cast. But it is handy, particularly in social situations where being able to translate right now what that very angry ogre is yelling might be helpful. But the main ability at this level is that when you cast a leveled spell, you can swap the damage type with another type that appears in your spellbook of a spell of the same level. In a vacuum, this seems really good. Certainly better than the sorcery metamagic that does a limited version of the same thing and has been getting a lot of talk. How good is partly dependent on how often you run into damage vulnerable, resistant, or immune creatures. Well, you are a wizard, and there's a lot of fire-resistant or immune creatures, so throwing a force ball instead of a fireball could be occasionally helpful. And you have to love the idea of casting Bludgeoning Cloud, as nothing says you have to stick with elemental damage types, or even sense. Still, this isn't that much better than simply having a couple blast spells with different damage types available to cast when you run into an immune monster. Additionally, this is the only significant feature at this level, and it's pushing me toward casting blast spells. Otherwise, this feature is pointless. As a wizard, I'm a controller first. If I'm focusing on blasting instead of that sweet, sweet control, then I want a lot of support from the subclass, like what School of Evocation supplies. Beyond switching the damage type, Scribes doesn't make my blast casting any better with any other features. One more note. To take maximum advantage of this feature, you want a lot of spells in your spellbook, for all those different damage types. But you're only guaranteed 2 spells per level. The rest you have to find in the world. If there are magic book libraries and every big city has a scroll mart, then this should be easy. However, in many games, and the ones I'm used to, spells aren't available from every street vendor, so you may not be able to find the one with the damage type that you're looking for. Based on campaign, at best the multiple third level features are okay, and at worst, useless and pointless. At 6th, you get the class's premier ability, Manifest Mind, or Super Familiar. This feature is clearly good because familiars and arcane eyes are good. Of course, by now you have a familiar, so it's hard not to compare them. For spying, Manifest Mind wins out by not being able to die, but loses by your not being able to see through its senses. It telepathically tells you what it sees. It also isn't able to pull levers. And it giving off light can come in handy when you need a nightlight, though less so when you're trying to be sneaky. Overall, it's good, but loses out to the familiar, except for one big difference. You can cast through it. And not just touch spells. This means you can send it into an unknown dungeon room, and if something's there, can hypnotic pattern or fireball it. You can hide behind a tree during a big battle and let it stand out as the target and cast your magic missiles. For a squishy wizard, that's pretty great. However, while you could keep the Manifest Mind active all day, you can only cast through it a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So most of your career, that means less than 1 whole fight. 3 times at level 5, 4 at 9th, and never more than 6. So forget the blasting. You'll use up all your allowed castings too quick. Think about spells that last a long time. Warning, rules as written says that you can cast as if you were in the mind space using its senses. It doesn't say you can keep using its senses for that spell after the initial casting. So if you have a spell that requires additional sight, like Eye Bite that lets you affect a new creature each turn that you can see, don't bet on this working with it after that first target. I like this ability. It's the sort of thing you want to build a character around. But with that limited use, this is more something you'd use in the big boss fight in a day, and the rest of the time act like a regular wizard. That turns this from a defining feature to a nice add-on. I wish I could trade away all those third level features for another few castings through the mind. Oh well. At 10th, there's Master Scrivener, which lets you create 1 spell scroll from your own first or second level spells, limited to those that take 1 action to cast, which is then powered up 1 level. Only you can use this scroll, and it vanishes at the end of the day. It's basically a complex way of saying you're getting a free 2nd or 3rd level spell slot a day, except you have to preset what you'll cast. More spell slots are good. So just make sure it's a spell you know you're going to want to cast, even more than one that will benefit from upcasting, although one that fits both criteria is nicer. Sure, a 10th another 1st or 2nd level spell is good. Setting the right excitement level, the uncommon magic item Pearl of Power would be better, and my current character just dropped attunement to one as it wasn't worth it anymore, so this feature's fine. You also get to create normal spell scrolls for half the time in gold, and this one annoys me. If they were giving you this power, they should explain in the feature's write-up how it's used. The feature specifically references the Dungeon Master's Guide, but that doesn't tell you the cost of making scrolls, so what's half of that? It tells you the value of scrolls in case you want to buy one. Are those supposed to be the same thing? If so, no one outside of this subclass is ever going to sell scrolls, as there's no profit. Xanathar's Guide did specify the cost to make them, but it contradicts the DMG, unless scroll makers actually lose money on each scroll. With nothing specified in the feature, it's hard to say if this ability is useless or mildly useful. Without a generous DM adjusting and specifying how it works, this is probably nothing you'll use. And unless you have an upper level rogue in the party, it doesn't seem to be worth bothering with. Then at 14th level, you get One with the Word, which in the past week I've heard called an amazing feature and complete garbage. To which I answer to both, yep. Besides giving you advantage on Arcana checks, which isn't this a 3rd level kind of feature? This feature allows you, when you have your Manifest Mind going, to negate all damage you take. Dragon breathes on you, you shrug. Meteor swarm hits, you smile. The cost of this? You roll 3d6 and delete that many spell levels worth of spells from your spellbook. They come back in d6 long rests, and until then, you can't cast these spells under any circumstances. If your spellbook is mainly made up of the spells you use all the time and keep prepared, you'd be way better off dying, assuming there's a cleric in the party to bring you back. The price is way too high. If you're in the middle of a dungeon or a quest, you have just hobbled yourself to the point that you might be useless for 6 days. It's a horrible feature. Though, in most of the games I'm familiar with, where your spellbook would have a good number of extras that you could live without for a few days, this is okay. Remember, it's spells in your spellbook, not spells you have prepared, not spells you have used that you're having to get rid of. On the other hand, if you're in a game where Scrollmart runs midnight specials and weird wizards keep shoving their scroll books in your face, that is, the kind of world where you can maximize that 3rd level damage switching feature, then this becomes great. Okay, not that great since you can only use it once a day, but once a day you can laugh at death, if you've got the spare spells to throw out. It's kind of odd to give the wizard this ultimate defense when at 6th level he was all about hiding. So, fill your spellbook with junk, because you can't trust that the spells you lost will be back in time when you'll need to throw them away again. So come on, find traps. Witch Bolt, Crown of Madness, Mornicanon's Sword, Wall of Sand. Every spell you never want to cast, here's your use for them. There's a joy in seeing find traps fade away. Really, this is useful and kind of fun. Okay, put it all together, and in the right kind of game, one with magic spells easy to acquire and a limited number of battles in a day so you can keep using Manifest Mind to cast your spells as you hide, this can be a very solid subclass. However, in many others, this is one of the worst wizard subclasses. And the wizards have some pretty good subclasses. So have a long talk with your DM before generating a scribe wizard. And if you don't know what the game's going to be like, this isn't a good bet. Well, that's it for now. I'll be back next time with a subclass I really like. Until then, please like and subscribe. Keep playing D&D. And if anyone asks, chocolate is one of the 4 food groups.